Hello, and welcome to this group presentation about energy coupling by Jessica Thompson and Rachel DeSilvio. Energy coupling is an important aspect of many biological reactions. First, let's go over the different objectives that we will address through this presentation. In order to provide you with complete information about energy coupling, we will first introduce the concept of free energy change, which is a key idea that explains how energy coupling works. We will compare and contrast exergonic and endergonic reactions. We will follow this information with a discussion of energy coupling as a whole, and the applications of energy coupling will be provided. Now it's time to discuss our first topic, free energy change. Free energy change is defined as the energy that is available for us to do work, where work is defined as a measure of the energy transferred from force that is applied over a distance. When energy is used to move an object or to perform a reaction, work is being done. The first figure on the top left from the class textbook shows a mechanical example of the free energy change as an object is moved up a hill and then down a hill. Work must be done on the object to move it up the hill, which raises its potential energy and increases its free energy change, delta G. When an object moves down a hill, it releases potential energy, decreasing delta G. This means that the lower or more negative delta G is, the more favorable the reaction is, because it does not take work or as much work for the object to move or the reaction to proceed. We can think about delta G and its influencing factors as they apply to chemical reactions in terms of equilibrium. The equilibrium constant, which is an expression of the concentration of products at equilibrium over the concentration of the reactants at equilibrium, describes how close to equilibrium a reaction is. Describing the ratio of products to reactants at equilibrium helps us understand if a reaction is moving right, where products are dominating, or left, where reactants are dominating. Delta G tells us how energy is changing as the system moves toward equilibrium. Therefore, the magnitude of delta G depends on how far the system is from equilibrium. This is evident by looking at the equation for delta G. The diagram on the bottom left shows how delta G influences chemical reactions. On the left, we see that the reaction between glucose and inorganic phosphate to make glucose 6-phosphate has a high delta G value, meaning it takes energy for this reaction to happen and is therefore not favored. Then in the second reaction, we see that ATP is turned into ADP and inorganic phosphate. And this step has a large negative delta G. So this reaction is energetically favored because the products have less energy than the reactants. Chemical bonds contain potential energy in their bonds, and the breaking of bonds in a chemical reaction is thus a source of free energy. The energy released by the breaking bonds from ATP in this reaction releases free energy. The third reaction that takes glucose and ATP and becomes glucose 6-phosphate and ADP can then be summarized as the sum of the first and second reaction processes. This overall reaction has a negative delta G value, meaning that the reaction between glucose and ATP is favorable. The first law of thermodynamics refers to the conservation of energy, where energy is neither created nor destroyed, only rearranged. Energy is used by the system, but not used up. A system refers to the reactants, products, solvent, and immediate atmosphere. An isolated system is where there is no exchange of matter or energy between system and surroundings. An example of an isolated system would be an insulated sealed container, like a thermos, where the contents will remain hot or cold. A closed system is where there is an exchange of energy but not matter between system and surroundings. An example of a closed system would be placing a lid over a saucepan while cooking food on a stove. The lid prevents matter from splashing out, but heat is still able to escape. An open system is where there is an exchange of both energy and matter between system and surroundings. An example of an open system is a living organism, because all living organisms exchange energy and matter with their surroundings. The second law of thermodynamics states that nature tends to increase entropy naturally. Entropy is the randomness and disorder in a system. The state of entropy refers to both energy and matter. Entropy will increase in a system when there is a dissipation of heat, an increased number of molecules, or a change in the state of matter, such as melting or evaporating. One relatable example is a picture of a clean bedroom and then a picture of a messy bedroom. Items are strewn randomly about and there is excessive disorder. It takes energy to go into the room and put things back where they belong and create order. The more that is in the room, just like the more molecules in a system, the more disorder can occur. Another great example of entropy would be the melting of an ice cube to a puddle of water. Here's a fun, simple activity that students could do. We would give each student an ice cube to set in front of him on a lab table, then ask the students to draw an ice cube on a blank piece of paper. We could compare all of the ice cube drawings to show that they all look similar. They will all have a similar shape because there is structure and order. This state has less entropy. We would then ask the students to draw a puddle of water and then compare these pictures. Every puddle should look different. Once the ice cube, the solid form, melts into water, the liquid form, there is randomness and disorder. This transition from a solid to a liquid allows for more movement of the molecules, so entropy increases. By now, the ice cube on the table has begun to melt, and the students can visually see the randomness to the melting as each puddle on the lab table is different. We can end the activity with a discussion on how this simple activity relates to entropy and coming up with more examples of entropy. When talking about free energy change, there are two types of reactions. If the net change in free energy is negative, so that energy is released, the reaction can occur spontaneously as they can occur without the addition of energy. This reaction is an exergonic reaction and is favored over reactions that require energy input. Exo means outside and ergon means work. So exergonic reactions release energy in the form of work. Looking at this exergonic graph, there will be less free energy at the end of the reaction because it released energy. Cellular respiration is a great example of an exergonic reaction as it releases energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate, ATP. Other examples of exergonic reactions are the formation of rust during the oxidation of iron, as the chemical reaction of oxygen and iron releases small amounts of heat very slowly, and combustion, which is a much quicker and obvious release of heat. For many biological reactions in the body, such as building macromolecules, the net change in free energy is positive, so that the reaction requires energy. This is called an endergonic reaction. In Greek, endo means within, and ergon means work. So this reaction requires energy through work. If you look at the graph for this endergonic reaction, you see that the energy increases from the beginning to the end of the reaction because the energy is absorbed in this reaction, meaning it requires energy. Photosynthesis is an example of an endergonic reaction, as it uses energy in the form of sunlight to create sugar for the organism. Other examples of endergonic reactions include DNA and RNA synthesis, which uses ATP, GTP, CTP, and TTP for building DNA and RNA molecules. Protein synthesis, as enzymes and ribozymes work together to bond amino acids to form polypeptide chains. About 5 ATP are required for every 1 amino acid added to the chain. The investment of ATP for this process is beneficial in the end, as some proteins made can be used as enzymes, lowering necessary activation energy in other reactions, and also in fatty acid synthesis, which uses ATP and NADPH as energy sources. If the delta G for a chemical reaction is positive, the reaction cannot spontaneously reverse or exist in an equilibrium mixture. This is why sodium chloride table salt does not spontaneously change into sodium and chloride ions. When reactions move from high to low free energy, however, delta G is negative, and the reaction can spontaneously occur. Oftentimes, one reaction relies on another because the addition of another molecule or resource lowers the delta G for the reaction. The intermediate molecule from the first reaction may even be used in the next reaction, allowing the overall reaction to occur. This is energy coupling, where energy from a favored reaction, such as an exergonic reaction producing energy, powers an unfavorable reaction, such as an endergonic reaction that requires energy. The drawing on the right from Khan Academy shows this process. In this illustration, ATP acts like a charged battery. When the battery is plugged into something like a cell phone, the energy from the battery is released to be used for other things, like charging the phone. Once the energy from the battery is gone, it will not spontaneously reappear. Energy must be added to the battery, ADP and inorganic phosphate, before it is turned back into a charged battery, ATP, to be used as a power source once again. It is important to note that this is only true of the overall reaction energy change, delta G is negative. Each reaction in a coupled process can be endergonic or exergonic. Another student activity that would help students think outside the box and visualize these concepts is Pictionary. We would split the class into two groups. One member of the first group would be given a word from the word bank. That person has 3 minutes to draw the word and have their team guess what word they picked. If their team does not guess the word within the 3 minutes, the other team has 20 seconds to guess the word from the drawing. Each correct guess is 1 point. Then it's the other team's turn to draw and guess a word. Now, depending on the level of the students, you can choose to show the word bank to the students guessing the words or not. We discussed a number of aspects that are all important in energy coupling. But why is energy coupling so important? There are a number of essential biological processes that occur as a result of energy coupling, and this slide covers only a few of them. ATP hydrolysis, an exergonic reaction, is the splitting of phosphoanhydride bonds using water and causes energy from these bonds to be released. This energy production drives many endergonic reactions in the body. One such example is kinesin movement, where the energy is used by a small motor neuron called kinesin to power its walk along microtubule fibers in the neuron. Kinesin carries vesicles full of neurotransmitters along the neuron, enabling motor function. Another example is the activity of topoisomerase. It's a function that is linked to ATP hydrolysis. Topoisomerase is an important enzyme that moves one double helix from DNA through a break in the other strand. They get the energy to do this from the hydrolysis of ATP, and a similar mechanism to kinesin. ATP hydrolysis also powers the sodium-potassium pump. The sodium-potassium pump drives sodium out of the cell and potassium inside the cell. After phosphorylation, the protein pump changes shape, allowing for 3 sodium ions to leave the cell. When potassium attaches the protein pump, the shape changes again and releases the phosphate, causing the potassium to then enter the cell.